The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only. I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of?
It's October 30th, 2020, the day before Halloween. Didn't fly fast there, Phil?
It just sped by. It really did.
I looked back in my memory to history to other Halloweens, and it just felt like I had so much more time, but this October, I guess we just needed it more.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those Octobers where, everything is going on. I mean, everyone says 2020, and when you say 2020, everybody knows what that means.
Yeah.
It's just been such a tough year that, we need some fun things in our lives, Halloween, this year coming, and it helped me, a little bit,
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it gave us something to focus on. Because the summer's not really a thing you can do at home. The summer is...
No, it's not.
Yeah, but Halloween is something you can do at home. And the weather's been crazy. It's snowing all over America.
Wow.
Today in New York, they got 2 inches of snow. And it's...
I didn't know that.
They did.
Wow.
Deborah Drake, who wrote The Vampire's Kiss, got 2 inches of snow. And it's 40 degrees, and the wind is harsh. We actually turned our heat on for the first time.
Yeah, I've got mine on, too. It's cold out. It is.
And next week it's supposed to be close to 70, so I guess we'll survive. But hopefully there'll be trick-or-treating tonight, and I'm hoping they're safe. I know a lot of kids went to the trunk-or-treats or went over to the mall or did, family things. There'll be trick-or-treating here tonight, some on Sunday, some tomorrow in various areas. But on this last night of Halloween, what are your plans?
I actually do have work I got to do. I have an article that I got to do, an assignment. So I'm going to do that. Unfortunately, that's going to take up some time.
Yeah, right.
But if I have some time afterwards, I'm going to watch that Mischief Night movie. That's some time before I go to bed. Oh, and I wanted to mention, too, I believe I'm correct on this, that Nightside Tales of Outer Noir, our anthology, releases today.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I think it's today or tomorrow, but I noticed all the things.
October 30th.
Was it 30th? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put up links for that over at the show website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. It's a great anthology. Mark Slade invited us, and I wrote a story about... Well, I won't give it away. Let's just say it's a Greek mythical creature and a wife who believes that her husband's cheating on her. What was yours about?
Yeah, I've actually read yours. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's about a nuclear explosion and all the stuffed animals in town come to life. Mm-hmm. And kind of like the aftermath, it focuses on like a detective and... Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty out there, but I enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Mark, for inviting us. Like I said, we'll have links up where you can get that anthology over at the website. Now, so at some point in the next day or two, you have to watch the Mortuary Collection.
Right. I'm gonna have to fit that in somewhere. Yeah.
It's a wonderful movie, and the thing is, you're gonna watch it, and you're gonna feel like you're 10 again, or maybe 12. Yeah, and you're watching an 80s horror movie like Creepshow. Yeah. Or like Tales from the Dark Side. Because Ryan Spindell, and that's what he said, he wants to put the fun back into horror. He wants horror not to be dark and brooding, but fun and enjoyable. And that's his goal as a filmmaker and a screenwriter. And you're really going to love this. Clancy Brown plays such an amazing role as Montgomery Dark. I mean, you just hear that name, Montgomery Dark. Head Mortician.
Head Mortician, yeah.
It's more like a carnival. It's full of these crazy rooms and winding staircases. He just did such a great traditional horror film, and it's so great to see Shudder bringing back these 80s kind of style, like with Creepshow and stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Shudder's bringing back some really great stuff, and Creepshow was great. It really captured the spirit of the first two movies, that 80s essence with the practical effects. And
exactly.
Very, very limited CGI. I didn't really notice much at all. You're actually able to see the effects on screen. You know they're actually there, and they're not computer generated. I really enjoy that all practical effects.
Yeah, some of the episodes didn't even have special effects. They didn't need them.
Right, yeah.
Like the Death's Head written by Josh Mallerman, where it's just a little girl and a little dollhouse.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, you didn't need any special effects for that. It was just
just a story.
Yeah, that was really good. That was the second story, I believe. Right?
Yeah, it was right there.
That was a good one.
And Joe Lansdale had a great one in there about
the Scarecrow.
Oh, what a great episode from Joe!
Yeah,
just fantastic.
I loved it. And I liked that he said it in I believe it was 1987. It was the setting for that.
Yeah,
which is cool. And at first I didn't realize it, but then I realized, like, I actually went back and I read, but I was noticing their clothing and their attire. I'm like, this looks like it's from the 80s at some point. And then I realized, oh wait, and then I saw 87. Okay,
kind of like the whole Stranger Things renewal, the revival back to the 80s. Okay, so this is episode 152, the Mortuary Interview, because I got a chance to talk to screenwriter, author, and filmmaker director Ryan Spindell the other day over at Trapdoor Pictures because I wrote an article based on the Mortuary Collection, an article and a review, and he liked it so much he got in touch. So he was able to give me a little time. They're very busy over there right now, especially with filming sort of winding back up after COVID, but it was a great interview. Spoiler warning. If you have not seen the Mortuary Collection, or even parts of Creepshow, go right now, get Shudder. There's several free trials you can get. Watch the Mortuary Collection. Go see Creepshow. And then go download a copy of Mercy from Amazon.com by T-Fox Dunham. Because, what the hell? While you're on a roll, and you're actually taking orders from me for once, go and do it. And then come and listen to episode 152, and it's a great way to finish off this wonderful Halloween run that we've had. And so we'll play that interview now, and we'll be right back to say goodbye after the interview on episode 152, the Mortuary Interview with Ryan Spindell on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, Para X Radio, Friday nights at 9 p.m. Check out our website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com. I've been doing a lot of work on it. We now have a great subscription page that features about 10 subscription services, plus our archive of ghost stories, articles, and things like that. And some great Halloween stuff, because tomorrow is Halloween 2020, but it's really Halloween weekend of 2020. And we'll be right back with that interview with Ryan Spindell on What Are You Afraid of?
This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America.
This is Joan Lansdale, creator of the Hap and Leonard series.
This is actor and filmmaker Steve Monarch from Friday the 13th, the series.
This is Heather Taddy from Paranormal State and Alien Highway.
This is Chuck Zukowski from Travel Channel's show Alien Highway.
This is Dacre Stoker, great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker and author of Dracul.
This is Michelle Belanger from Portals to Hell.
And you are listening to Ghost Stories and Horror with T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
With T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
Fox and Phil.
Billy and Fox.
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show.
What are you afraid of?
There'd be no Philadelphia without Uncle Lloyd.
We are back on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're celebrating Halloween with a lot of friends this year. For the first year that we haven't gone live to a location, of course, because of COVID, it's been an exciting time. We got to speak with Daniel Kraus, who finished The Living Dead for George A. Romero. That must have been quite an honor. We spoke to Lisa Morton, the previous head of the Horror Writers Association, about her book on seances that just came out. Of course, we hung out ourselves and talked about Halloween. And just recently, we talked to Michelle Bollinger, who is on Portals to Hell. She's a friend of our friend, Katrina Weidman, and she was also on Paranormal State. And we hung out with her and talked about ghosts, demons, fae, and even vampires. And of course, Dacre Stoker was on with a reading from his book Dracul, and that was a lot of fun. So we've had vampires, ghosts, zombies, and foxes, all in Halloween 2020. Remember, celebrate a safe Halloween, social distance, respect your friends, and just get out there and have fun and think of your neighbors. Anyway, we have a great guest on episode 152. It was a bit of a surprise, actually. This year, I decided to watch some Shudder. Usually, I hide out with my DVDs in the background, not really watching modern horror, and then I decided to get my free week of Shudder. I was interested in watching the Creepshow series, which I quite enjoyed, and then I went over and looked at the other offerings on Shudder, and I found the Mortuary Collection, and I quite enjoyed the Mortuary Collection, so I went on and wrote a review, and I talked about modern horror as opposed to horror in the 1980s, and the review got noticed by the writer-director, Ryan Spindell, and we got into a conversation. So, on tonight's episode, we are going to be speaking to the Mortuary Collection's writer-director, Ryan Spindell. Ryan Spindell was raised in a crumbling, haunted mansion on the forgotten coast of Maine. His natural inclination towards the arts and his obsession with the Twilight Zone led him down the dark and twisted path of creepy storytelling from which he would never recover. In 2005, Ryan attended the Florida State University Film School, where he graduated with his master's in writing and directing. He then relocated to Los Angeles, where he founded Trapdoor Pictures, a boutique production company that specializes in what he calls the fun genre, content for film and television. Over the next several years, Ryan and his team made over a dozen short films and documentaries before shifting into the big leagues. Their first feature film, a horror anthology called The Mortuary Collection, was released on Shudder this October. Find more information out about Ryan and his crew and his movies at www.trapdoorpictures.com. Hello, Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Man, I've never heard anybody read my bio out loud, but now I just want to pay you to do it for me. You you read it with such an interesting sort of intent behind it. I love it.
The bill will be there at the end of the month, so we'll talk about rates. No, it's great having you on the show, and quite a surprise. This is actually an unplanned episode when I saw that we could interview you, and I'm planning to get this out on Friday night before Halloween because your movie has had such an effect on the horror community. I'm constantly seeing it talked about that I think you've made the horror movie of the year for the horror community.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, wow, I don't even know what to say about that. It's cool. I mean, it's been a long road coming on this one, as is the case with most independent horror films, I think. But this one particularly so. We premiered almost a year ago at Fantastic Fest, and then we've kind of just been sitting on the movie waiting for it to come out and kind of living in this strange bubble of not even knowing if the movie was going to work for anybody. So the fact that sort of it's been released on Shudder now and we're getting the responses we're getting from the audience, who ultimately is who the film was made for, has been a really incredible experience for me.
Fantastic, and it was an incredible experience for us. So, like you said, it's been quite a journey for you. You're from Maine, you attended Florida State University's film school, and then you ended up in Los Angeles forming your own production company. Was this your plan when you were younger? Is your professional life happening the way you wanted it to?
No, I don't think I didn't really come to filmmaking until I was a little bit older than most. I did grow up in Maine. My parents were physicians, and they set up a clinic in sort of the remote coastal northern part of Maine that sort of serviced all of the kind of more rough and tumble areas of the state. And so it was kind of a solitary existence as a kid. I spent a lot of time reading Stephen King, as you are required to do when you live in Maine. And sort of just like, being a kid in the middle of nowhere when you just sort of have nothing to do but let your imagination kind of take over and develop. And it's funny because at the time I remember, I'd watch movies, Spielberg movies with kids living in the suburbs. And I was so envious of this idea of having friends that live next door and kind of this more urban life. And I sort of hated this like small town existence. But in retrospect, where I am now, I realized that I owe so much of my creative process to those formative years. So it was really cool. But I always was an arty kid. I would draw all the time. My sort of dream as a kid was to be a cartoonist. I would spend a lot of my free time in sort of outside of school art classes and just reading and drawing and sketching and kind of building things. I've always been sort of a tactile, build stuff with my hands guy. And I didn't really know that you could be a filmmaker as a career. That didn't really become clear to me until in high school, I think it was my freshman year, somebody showed me a copy of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. It was the first movie I ever remember seeing where I could sort of see the filmmaker kind of bleeding through in every frame. And I could tell that that Sam and his team were having a great time and really sort of going for it. And I remember walking away from that movie and for the first time thinking, hey, this is something that I could enjoy doing. It wasn't until college that I really started investing myself in the process. And, long story longer, I kind of ended up going to FSU, which has a fantastic film school. And we shot, I think I worked on 68 films while I was there. And I worked in every position, and I ended up writing and directing 5 or 6. That kind of led me to Los Angeles, where I got sort of an agent and a manager. The rest is history, as they say.
And the future coming. That's fantastic. It was also in Maine where I developed a love for horror. My grandmother had a cabin on Highland Lake, and one evening I discovered a hardbound book under her coffee table called The Amityville Horror. I think I was 8. And I spent each night for the next week terrified to go to sleep in the dark. And
that's an amazing story. I love that. I mean, I had a similar one, but it was with the book It, and I was probably around the same age. And that is some adult material for a kid. What's funny is I really couldn't watch horror movies as a kid. I was too terrified of them, but I could read. For some reason, that was my gateway into the genre, and sort of ultimately I think how I got here today.
Besides Stephen King and of course the great Sam Raimi, what other media, books, and shows and films influenced your directing and writing now? Well,
I was going to say the staples that influenced this movie, but I do think this movie is a bit of a sort of amalgamation of all of my influences anyway, just in the fact that it is an anthology movie and there are multiple stories with different subgenres sort of baked in. But yeah, again, The Twilight Zone was and always will be the foundation for everything that I love about genre. That, as I said, I couldn't really watch scary movies, but I could watch The Twilight Zone because that was my dad's favorite show, and he had the whole series on VHS. And so I could watch that with him, and that was sort of like a bonding experience as you do as a kid when you want to be like your dad. And that was really my gateway into the genre, pre-Sam Raimi. But then as I got a little bit older, there was the Tales from the Crypt series was a huge one, the original Creep Show 1 and 2 movies. And then on the reading front, again, always having been a big reader, I would say it's Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut, and Richard Matheson are all these sort of seminal authors, specifically in their short form writings that really kind of led towards what the Mortuary Collection ultimately would be, which is not only a collection of stories, but a feature film about storytellers.
And I knew it. I knew it. When I saw the Mortuary Collection, I said, the writer-director grew up on Ray Bradbury, because you have so many of those wonderful Ray Bradbury elements in the show, especially the character of Montgomery Dark. That's just classic Ray Bradbury right there. So
that's amazing praise. He is maybe my favorite author, especially in the short story. His book, The October Country, is my favorite book of all time. So that's really cool.
One of mine too, though it sometimes rivals with Something Wicked This Way Comes, which was a great Disney movie with.
Yes. It's so funny. I do remember, I wouldn't watch horror films, but I did have a Halloween party when I was probably 7 years old, and my mom rented a scary movie for me and my friends to watch, and she rented Something Wicked This Way Comes. And I remember just being scared shitless of the movie. I remember it was starting to play, and it has and my friends were all gathered around. And of course, it's the most, I'd actually say it is a little bit scary, but it's definitely a kid's movie. And I definitely was of the age that it was fine for me to watch it. But I remember standing in the back corner of the room, just trying my best to look tough in front of my friends and watching that movie.
The wonderful Jonathan Pryce as Mr. Dark was just,
so good.
Was an iconic role. And I've actually been thinking a lot about him because I've been running a Dungeons & Dragons Ravenloft game every week, and they are visiting the Haunted Carnival on this Wednesday. Oh,
yeah. So cool. So cool. I love that so much.
So I've been writing up a lot of different things about how they get turned into freaks, and I suppose they'll find out on Wednesday. Anyway, this is T. Fox Dunham with What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on ParaX Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Set those clocks back right after Halloween. And you can find our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com For our collection of ghost stories, each has an audio narrative component. You can either read the story or listen to it, plus a page for every episode, going back 152 episodes, plus articles, news features, then the music of our wonderful English folk singer, David Walton. He has a new album out, which he's done several scary songs for us, and you can download it there at www.whatyourafraidofpodcast.com. Now, our audience knows that every episode we have a true ghost story, so we're going to pause talking to Ryan to play a ghost story called The Little Girl Who Haunted Rockford Mansion. This is narrated by David Walton. I researched this story about a little house that we have here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, so we'll be right back with Mr. Ryan on episode 152, The Mortuary Interview.
The little girl who still plays in the halls of Rockford House, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Researched and written by T. Fox Dunham. Read by David Walton. In the summer, I like to fish the Conestoga River in Lancaster Central Park. When we drive down to the East End, we pass a colonial home and garden at the bend of the road, known as the Rockford House. Now a museum, the house was built in the 1790s by Revolutionary War General Edward Hand, a close personal friend of George Washington, and also an adjutant general during the American Revolution. Born in Ireland in 1744, Edward Hand was trained in medicine in Dublin. He served as a surgeon's mate in the Irish Army at Fort Pitt, and in 1774 he resigned the British service and moved to Lancaster to practice medicine. In 1775, he enlisted with the Continental Army and led troops at the battles of Boston, Long Island, White Plains, and Trenton. 10 years later, he purchased 177 acres of land and built the mansion. General Hand settled his family there, wife and 8 children, and with enslaved and free servants and labourers. The building is considered to be one of the most important examples of Georgian domestic architecture surviving in Pennsylvania, and the mansion's rooms are furnished with a collection of period furnishing and works of art. And of course, like most old places in Pennsylvania, the house remembers. The Hand family went on to have a tragic end, and because of their deaths, the building soon gained a reputation of being haunted or cursed. In 1807, after Edward had died, his son, young John, died. He had attended a horse race in Lancaster City, and it is said that while in town, John proposed to a young woman and was rejected. He returned home and shot himself. Stains on the floor are thought to be his blood. The Hand's daughter, Margaret, died of illness at the age of 11. After their deaths, the remainder of the family moved away from the estate, leaving the house in a state of disrepair. The land and property went through several owners, though they all refused to live in the house because of its haunted reputation. Eventually, the house was preserved and turned into a museum. It wasn't long after that the staff and visitors started to witness strange events. Most common are the phantom sounds coming from the building. Visitors and guides have reported hearing knocking sounds coming from the walls of the empty rooms. Footsteps run down the hall, and muffled conversations can be heard when the house is empty. On occasion, a little girl can be heard laughing at a told joke or funny event. Is this the apparition of Margaret who died at age of 11? Or perhaps a servant girl? Her voice has been recorded as an EVP, and she has been seen running down the hall, then fading away. Visitors have seen her standing in the door of the blue parlour, just watching them before dissipating. And it is reported that if a puzzle is left on the floor of the upstairs rooms, you will find it assembled the next day. Who is this little girl that seems destined to remain young forever in the walls of the lonely house in the park? Other members of the household have been witnessed. A misty figure has also been seen running through the basement hallway, then it fades away. Paranormal investigators have captured images of mist on photos. Caretakers at the museum have left for the evening and returned the next morning to find their exhibits disturbed or reorganized. Perhaps a message to let them know the spirits are still there. Several strange EVPs have been recorded on the site. Paranormal investigators have recorded intelligent responses to various questions. Recordings have been made of children laughing, and a paranormal investigator recorded evidence of a darker entity residing in the house when she captured a voice saying, "Kill her." Other threatening voices have also been recorded, indicating an angry spirit haunts the estate. Perhaps the voice of master of the house who still orders his servants to continue their labour even after death. The spirits of 18th century servants in period can still be seen tending to the rooms, trapped in their never-ending duties, even in death. Other visitors have experienced phantom smells in the house. Guests have reported the smell of fresh burning tobacco in the kitchen, or the smell of cooking food. Visitors sometimes smell the odour of a burning fire or recently snuffed out candles. Perhaps this is the spirit of Frank, a slave who was caught after running away and then died on the property. Songs popular among slaves have also been heard sung in the kitchen, though they quickly stop when someone approaches. Visitors to the park have also seen spirits on the property. After a long day of fishing, standing out in the stream, my wife was driving us home to Duke Street in Lancaster. I always enjoy passing by the estate, as I have long had a love for historic sites and used to work at several. I noticed a young girl in 18th century dress walking through the garden with a basket. I thought it was wonderful that the site had reenactors working there, even during the time of COVID-19, when so many museums won't survive without steady contributions. I looked away to tell my wife, and when I looked back, the little girl was gone. According to the website information, the house was closed with no scheduled tours. This is a common occurrence in places like Gettysburg. Visitors often see whom they believe to be reenactors, then discover that none were on site that date. Are these the spirits of the Hand family, isolated and bound to this Georgian mansion? Do the spirits of the staff still haunt this house, bound even after death to the property, or is the land itself haunted? There's a rumour that the bodies of several Native Americans were found under the house, though I cannot find confirmation of this. Rumours of native burial grounds often follow stories of hauntings. In October, the Rockford House hosts ghost tours in the evening. It is a rare and lovely place that is endangered. Many museums will close due to lack of funding during the COVID-19 shutdown, so please make sure to support these places and preserve our history.
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit. The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
Hello folks. I've uploaded a compilation of 10 songs with a ghostly theme that have been specifically recorded for various episodes of What Are You Afraid Of podcast.com. Go to Bandcamp and search for Brendan Shawland. The album is called The Ghostly Brendan Shawland. You can listen to them for free or download them for a modest fee as a complete album or as individual songs. Thank you.
We're back on episode 152, The Mortuary Interview. Thank you, David Walton, and thank you for doing all the narration you've done, especially over the last 5 years and this Halloween. I know it's quite a load of stuff for you, but we've had some wonderful shows thanks to you, sir. You've been incredible, and I hope you're enjoying this episode in Plymouth, England. But we are back on episode 152. This is T. Fox Dunham, What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. Check us out at our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com for more information about this episode and links to Mr. Ryan Spindell's work, especially over at Shudder, where he wrote and directed the wonderful Mortuary Collection. You came out to LA after going to film school, and it looks like you hit a lot of the different points of the country: Maine, Florida, LA. You love the coast. How and why did you form Trapdoor Pictures, and what is your mission?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, I've never been asked that before. What happened was when I moved out to Los Angeles in, I would say it was 2008. Again, my into the horror genre had been Sam Raimi, and also Peter Jackson's early movie Dead Alive was another movie I saw basically around probably a week later. I saw the two of those movies, and I became fascinated with this sort of kind of fantastic throwback fun genre, fun horror movies. I think prior to that, I had a very single-minded idea of what horror would be. I thought that horror was just kids getting slashed up in the woods by somebody with a pig mask. And so when I saw that sort of these artists and these creatives and these sort of savants, if you will, were making projects that were outside of what I imagined, I really kind of fell in love with the genre, and I started kind of going down that path, which was sort of taking all of my background in illustration and photography and construction and painting and all the things that I sort of love and kind of infusing them into my films. And so when I graduated film school, I moved out to Los Angeles, and I really wanted to make more of these types of films. I wanted to sort of start having all these meetings because I did a film in film school that sort of got me a lot of attention. And so I was kind of going into these big fancy studio offices and meeting with executives all over LA. And I was kind of pitching them all these sort of fun, fantastical ideas that I had that I wanted to make. At the time, it was just sort of the worst time for horror. We were sort of, and I don't mean to throw shade at the films that were being made, but Cabin Fever and Hostel had come out recently and been successes. And I enjoyed those movies. And the Saw movies were really sort of the thing. And as I went to all these meetings, I realized that everybody had a very single idea of what horror had to be. Horror had to be sort of contained within this small box for it to be a valid thing for them to invest in. And that kind of bummed me out. So the formation of Trapdoor Pictures was kind of born out of me sitting with some of my collaborators and my closest friends and saying, like, let's make a place where we can start making fun horror again. Let's make a small little boutique company. We have some resources and we have definitely the energy and the creativity. and let's try to start making horror that kind of is reminiscent of what we love best. It's a little Twilight Zone, a little Tales from the Crypt, a little comedy, a little horror, maybe even some pathos in there if we can get it. And sort of that was the humble beginnings. And not having really a lot of money or investors, we started in shorts. And so we started making sort of little short films here and there that we would release at film festivals and online eventually. And we made a documentary or two along the way. And we just kind of kept building up our brand until we finally decided to kind of take the next step and really try to do something on a real level. And so we did a Kickstarter, and we made a short film called The Babysitter Murders in 2015. We used that to raise the money for the Mortuary Collection. So The Babysitter Murders is actually 1/5 of the Mortuary Collection feature that we made first, and we kind of used that to drum up interest.
Excellent. And Kickstarter seems to be the way that indie companies are moving forward now, especially with the money problem in Hollywood. I have always tried to give indie film every Halloween an interest. I go onto Amazon Prime and I start typing in keywords and I start looking for movies uploaded that year in 2020. I just watched one called The Scientist about the start of a zombie apocalypse, and it's definitely an indie film. It's definitely didn't have a lot of money to be made, and it could have been edited better, but itself had a lot to add to the genre, and I make sure to go on and write reviews and get in contact. And you really said it when you said that Hollywood had stuck horror into this little box, and after watching the same Saw movie 6 times, or from like The Ring, what I really had it was with the remake of the Amityville Horror in 2005. And they took this wonderful film, this scary film, and turned it into sort of an axe murderer movie, and they lost all the nuance. They lost all the story in it. And I just had it with that. And every year I've been watching my own collection of films. And then when I saw yours and I saw Creepshow, I was like, it's back. We're back to 1980s horror. We're turning back the clock. And it just got me so excited. That's why I wrote the review. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for writing about it. I mean, I think that's the tricky part when you make small films like The Scientist or even the Mortuary Collection. We don't really have any of the budget or resources to do the marketing campaigns to even kind of stand up next to the big movies that are released. And I think it's what we find is it all comes through word of mouth, and it all comes through fan reactions to sort of get the word out. And that's been such a wonderful thing about Shudder that I sort of discovered in the process of releasing this, is that, the real fans are on that platform, and when they see something they love, they go out and they say it. I mean, that's rare, I think, for a lot of places where you can have your movie that people will watch it and then go right to Twitter and just start singing its praises. And that's kind of been where our second life has come from, is just the fans and the reaction.
It's thanks to these streaming services that a lot of new artists, authors, and filmmakers are finding a way to get into the industry before, especially with authors dealing with the main publishers, and then all of a sudden a lot of indie publishers showed up who started paying and started getting us out there, that we're able to see new creative voices that aren't instantly closed off by Hollywood in their desire to make the same film over and over again with money. And I suppose that's where you're making your bones in the battlefield of indie movies. Speaking of Hollywood, by the way, What Are You Afraid Of has recently made a deal with Paramount Pictures to promote some of their movies. We're getting access to their actors, and I just want to talk real quick about a wonderful movie coming out called Spell. We've got a Halloween treat for you. It's a terrifying suspense thriller called Spell, starring Omari Hardwick from the TV show Power, and Loretta Devine is premiering at home today. Marky, played by Omari Hardwick, awakens from a plane crash, imprisoned by a mysterious woman practicing hoodoo magic. He desperately tries to break free to save his family from the sinister rituals that await. Buy or rent Spell today on digital, rated R, from Paramount Pictures. We'll have links up for that, and they're going to be giving us some free movie codes that we can pass to our audience to watch the film for free. I think that's going to be quite a lot of fun. But coming back to Mr. Ryan Spindell on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show, episode 152, The Mortuary Interview. And this is a fun conversation. We will be premiering this episode the Friday before Halloween, so definitely go over to Shudder this weekend and check out the Mortuary Collection. Like I was saying, usually this time of year, I stick to the DVDs of older movies for my Halloween media cuisine. I love the Romero zombie movies. I just watched Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, the original. Of course, Amityville Horror and Tales from the Dark Side. Then I discovered Shudder, got my free trial, and I really loved the 80s horror effects that you put into it, and really felt like watching an older movie. Well, an older movie from the 80s, so I feel like you're bringing the 80s back to us. Where did the idea for this collection come from, besides the babysitter murders that you explained? So where did the other ideas come from? Where did the idea for the mortuary come from, and how did you develop this story?
It started off with a love of the short format. Particularly, I think that the short format is great for genre and horror specifically. And in that, I think that there are so many wonderful short horror stories that we just don't get to see because they don't really maintain a 90-minute runtime. Either the stories don't sort of move forward into a visual level, or we see this a lot too, I think, with modern horror, where it's they kind of have a short concept and then they stretch it into 90 minutes, and you sort of have this like a really great trailer, but a really disappointing feature experience. So it kind of started with the love of the format and me thinking, I want to find a way to tell short horror stories and kind of package them together so that I can potentially find a more mainstream audience. And of course, growing up on Creepshow, when I could finally watch Creepshow, then I was had done a deep dive in the old Amicus horror anthology films and just really kind of fell in love with that format, the gothic sort of fun nature of them. Although I will say the Amicus films are not very fun. They're very stiff and very British, but also very scary. So that was kind of the genesis. And I had a lot of short, fun ideas kind of rattling around in my brain for a long time. So I just started kind of writing them all down and kind of putting them together and thinking about what stories here can sort of work together into sort of create sort of a one experience. So, I had some stories that I really loved, but they didn't quite fit in the overall structure of sort of this 4 stories all tied together by the mortuary. And so that was the genesis. And then as far as the, having the creepy mortician in the old house on the hill, a lot of this movie was sort of built on the foundation of a love of classic genre. So there was times early on where some people said like, hey, we've kind of seen the mortician thing before. We've kind of seen the creepy old man on the hill before, like maybe do something different. But I was really adamant up front that I wanted to pay homage to the things that I really love and hold dear to the genre first and foremost. So that was the foundation, the house on the hill. The creepy mortician lurking in the shadows, the simple morality tales. But from there, it sort of became, okay, so now we have a foundation of the things we love, but we don't want this to be an homage film. So how can we start to twist this into something different? How can we expand these ideas into something fresh and honestly more exciting to me as a creative? I was thinking about the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, and how every week we go into his crypt and he pops out of the coffin and he has his puns and he has his sort of performance and he sort of gives us a show. But I started thinking about like, what is the Crypt Keeper doing when we're not there? Like, is he just waiting for us to show up? Is he sad? Is he lonely?
He's outside the crypt smoking a cigarette,
Yeah, he's just on a long cigarette break. But I think starting to think about who these storytellers were, these iconic storytellers when we weren't there, kind of started to sort of blossom into something a little bit more interesting and special for Montgomery. And that's kind of where Sam came in. And in a way, Montgomery represents sort of classic genre that I love, Sam kind of represents new horror and sort of new ideas of what horror should be. The movie kind of becomes about the old and the new debating which is more valid. And ultimately, the takeaway I'd like an audience to have is that they're both valid, and it's kind of in the fusion of the two that something special can be born.
In the fusion of the two, something special can be born. Speaking to Ryan, wonderful director and writer of the Mortuary Collection, Mr. Ryan Spindell, and we're talking about the evolution of horror and how it's changed over the last 20 years, and it sounds like it's reaching into the past to find some of its roots, yet moving forward. So, is Clancy Brown nearly as scary in real life? Because he has always struck me as a scary human being.
I thought the same thing before I met him, and it was, as you can imagine, quite intimidating when I got a call that said, hey, Clancy Brown is interested, but you have to go get lunch with him for him to sort of decide whether or not he likes you enough to do the project.
Oh, boy.
Because, Yeah, I mean, I never had that before, and of course, this is a movie that if you want to get a Clancy Brown in this movie, Clancy Brown is not making his day rate. This is a passion play on his part, and he wanted to sort of test my stones to see what kind of director I was going to be. So I went to this diner in North Hollywood and saw him sitting there in the back, and of course, he's enormous and as intimidating as you would think. And one sentence into the meeting, totally at ease, and he was just. He's just wonderful. I've said this before, but it's so nice to be able to talk about how great my actor was and not have to lie about it and not have to sort of do it for press. Like, he genuinely is one of the most laid back, cool, friendly guys. And he really was the sort of the beating heart of our whole production that kind of put everybody at ease. Because when you see this guy who's worked with some of the best directors in the world on some of the biggest projects in the world, and then he's at a little house in Astoria, like getting his makeup put on in the upstairs bedroom, and coming down and giving it his all. It was just so energizing, I think, for the rest of the crew.
That's wonderful. It's so cool to hear. You could really tell, watching Montgomery Dock, from the moment he pushes open the letter opener on the door and looks out, he's having a lot of fun. He enjoyed that role so much, and you can see the joy. And I told people, well, he's a scary mortuary director and mortician, but he's got a twinkle. I think but just...
That's perfect. That's such a perfect description. I love that.
He was just so much fun to watch, and he really brought it together for me. And he was the reason I kept going in the first few minutes, was seeing his eyes and hearing his voice as the kid on the bike is bicycling into the small maritime town and a riparian off the ocean, and finds that mortuary on a hill, that wonderful sort of fun house where there are so many different levels. And he just shows up in the beginning and sweeps you off your feet as a horror fan. Okay, so changing tacks a wee bit. All right, I'm just going to say 2 words, and I want to see what your reaction is. Exploding penis.
Cinematic genius.
Yeah. That was your height right there. Everything from now on, you're coming down, okay?
It's all downhill. It is all downhill. I knew that in the moment as we were shooting it. I was like, well, I've peaked.
That's it, yes. Okay, so just for our audience, I will warn them at the beginning that there are spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it and then come back and listen. Okay, so how did you do that special effect?
I ended up working with this really fantastic special effects company called Studio ADI. They are the geniuses behind movies like Tremors. They did Starship Troopers. They won an Academy Award for Death Becomes Her. And they most recently did sort of the design for the new Pennywise for the It movies. And so these guys are incredibly out of our league as far as the clout and their general body of work. But as I was making this movie, and this also kind of touches on what you were talking about as movies from the 80s, one of the things we really want to do is we wanted to have entirely practical effects across the board. I'm not against visual effects when used properly, but for this movie and this tone and this vibe, it was going to have to be practical effects all the way. And I knew we didn't have the budget to really afford the amount we wanted to do. So I just started making these impassioned letters, writing these impassioned letters to all of my favorite special effects companies in Los Angeles. ADI somehow responded, and they saw the short, and they loved the short, and they loved the feature, and I went and I had a meeting with them. They asked me how much money I had, and I told them, and they got real sad for about 5 minutes. And they said, you know what, let's do it. Because they still operate on passion and love for the genre, first and foremost, and the artistry. And if they can pay their bills and keep the lights on, these guys just keep chugging away. And it's so amazing to be in this, shop and see the brain bug from Starship Troopers on the wall and see the animals from Jumanji on the other wall and know that these guys are working on your little tiny movie. And for the gag you're talking about in particular, I remember specifically going up to their shop up in the valley, and there was 4 adult men sitting in a boardroom, with the dark cherry oak walls and the plush leather chairs. And for about an hour and a half, we were discussing how we would make a penis explode on screen. I just had to do a sort of pause for a minute and be like, can you believe this is our job? Like, we get paid as adult men to sit around and talk about exploding dicks. And from there, I was like, you know what? I made the right choice. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Well, you certainly justified it, I can say. And it was one of those, every movie, every story has a couple of sentences or lines or a pivotal moment that just defines the whole movie. And that was definitely one of the hearts of your story, especially when you're digging into those fears and into those things that give you such a sore stomach, like Ice Pirates. They had the clamping thing that was about to cut off the guy's genitals. You feel that.
Yes.
And you didn't overdo it either. It was like 1 second and boom, it explodes. It's quick enough where it sort of leaves you going, huh? And then you figure it out and you're like, I can't believe they just did that. And it was awesome.
Well, it's interesting when you're writing shorts because, in some ways, short stories, they need to have a lot of the staples that feature length or full length stories have. They're, at least in my mind, they still have 3-act structures. They still have sort of all the typical setups and payoffs, but they're really sort of condensed down to the bare essentials. And one of the things about a short is that you have to have a good ending. You have to have a big ending or a memorable ending. It's like a joke. You're at a party and you command everyone's attention and you tell a joke. The longer the joke is, the better the ending has to be. So we put a lot of work into all of these to really make sure that by the end of each individual segment, you kind of earned the legwork it took to get there. And that's sort of, I think, hopefully true across the board for all of these. It's partly that, but also partly just the fun factor. And again, there's a lot of disadvantages to making an independent movie, which is you don't have any money, you don't have any time. It feels like everything's against you at every moment. But the advantage is nobody's giving you studio notes about what you have to do. And that really allows you to swing for the fences and, blow up a dick if you have to.
And blow up a dick if you have to. Well, that's a career definer, but I appreciate it. You've got your moment in the sun. You're on the screen. You're just letting go. You are just gunning for it. And I love to see that kind of passion, especially in somebody who's talented and deserves to be on screen and on the film or published in the book. So, in the Mortuary Collection, the theme was all villains are eventually punished, that there is some kind of karmic justice in the universe, even if it's visited by supernatural means. Why did you select this theme to drive your movie?
I think it sort of comes with the territory. I remember we had an early discussion, me and my producing partner, Justin Ross, and he's been sort of my collaborator since the very beginning. And we really have the deep talks. We really sort of get into the nitty-gritty of every single detail. I mean, if there's a moment in this movie, we had 2 or 3 days worth of discussions about it. And I remember early on, he said, well, what's the theme that connects all of the movies? What's the thing that, why do you want to tell this sort of collection of stories as one? I was like thinking about it and kind of struggling with it a little bit. And he said, maybe it's that every evil deed, you pay the price. If you commit evil, you pay the price. I was like, well, that's not really that interesting because that just comes with it. That's how all of these stories work. There's the karma comeuppance component just comes with the territory. I was like, that's not enough. I think we get that just in the packaging. And I started thinking about why I wanted to tell a movie about stories. And it really became about the storytellers and the sort of celebrating not just the stories they tell, but the people who tell them and how they go about telling them. And that's where the sort of entire wraparound story really came to life for me. And sort of this debate. Again, Montgomery, he represents the old school classics or cinema conventions, and he sort of lives and sort of relishes that format. And then Sam, she's sort of like young and rebellious, and she thinks horror should be genre bending and should subvert expectations and should sort of twist and turn and push you to new places. And so the central debate is Montgomery says, you have to pay the price eventually. And she says, not really, in real life, that's not the truth. And so that's sort of their argument really is the spine of the whole movie. Where the movie ultimately goes, I think, is left a little bit up to the audience as to what they want to take away with it. I know my thoughts on it, but I think it's more interesting to sort of have audiences either celebrate or rebel about how the story eventually sort of comes to a conclusion.
Excellent. That's very cool. And it's nice to see good storytelling with good themes, especially ones that are so personal to our time that we're living today. Going back to themes and the stories you told, what really got me was segment 3, for personal reasons. I'm a cancer survivor. The chemotherapy and radiation disabled me. I had a lot of radiation for about 3 or 4 months, and before that was chemotherapy for a rare form of lymphoma. So Samhain is a special time for me. In segment 3, Wendell Owens is taking care of his wife, who is essentially brain dead. And of course the doctor comes in and says she could last another year in this vegetative state, and he's doing everything for her. He's following through on his promise as a husband, and unfortunately he's given his life to this. He's got many bills, and this was certainly not the life that he had thought they were going to have, and he just can't take it anymore. And finally, the doctor comes in and says, well, here's some painkillers, and gives him a veiled way of ending her life that's untraceable. And I won't go into it more. I'll let our audience go back and watch that if you haven't seen it yet. Sorry for spoilers, but it's definitely a frightening theme. It's something I was always scared of doing to a spouse, was handling all my medical issues. And my cancer, though in remission currently, keeps coming back and taking shots at me. And it's the kind of thing where one day it's going to come back in a form that's just going to wipe me from the earth. And did I ever really want to do that to a spouse? And I really had held back on that until I met Allison, and she had convinced me that she was brave enough and could handle it. So that scene really had a lot of power for me as I'm watching it. And I really felt guilty watching this poor man slave away, and watching it so passionately. Listens, all the scenes, all the buildings were kind of dirty. They were old-fashioned. You had technology and setting from like the 1950s or 60s. You couldn't really tell what time frame they were in. So the one scene that really got me is he's in the lift and he's going down, and the lift jumps cable. It's going super fast now, and they begin to float, and he and the body of his dead wife begin to spin in air, and they do this incredible air waltz where they're dancing with each other, and her face is quite contorted, and he looks terrified, and they come together and they kiss, and it's like this passionate 4 minutes of film that you can't look away from. So how did you set that scene? How did you film it? Give me a little insight on that one.
Sure. Well, first off, I mean, I find your story to be very moving, and this segment is the most personal for myself as well. It is definitely rooted deeply in some of my own fears and insecurities about relationships and growing old, and commitments made and commitments broken. It's really wonderful to hear that it affected you, hopefully in a cathartic way. So that scene is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. It was shot in the most lo-fi way you wouldn't believe it. It was one of these moments where, originally the film had a somewhat different ending in which it was a little bit more traditional and a little bit more horror based. And it was the ghost of his wife came back, and it was just sort of had like a kind of like a big monster movie ending, with flashing lights and horror. And we were in the process of sort of just developing it with my collaborators and talking about it like we do. Again, we talk too much at points. And one of my producers, Ben Heathcote, he actually plays the killer in the Babysitter Murders segment, interestingly enough. He sort of said, sort of as a joke, he's like, oh, what if the elevator drops so fast it goes anti-gravity? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I just thought about it. I was like, oh, well, now we have to do it. Like, now that's such a cool idea. We have to figure it out. And of course, the money people are just like, yeah, there's no freaking way you're going to do an anti-gravity sequence. And I'm like, no. I mean, from the very beginning, we said we have to swing for the fences. That, like you said, this might be our last chance to do something. Let's leave it all on the table. And so the consensus was, well, you could do an anti-gravity sequence if you want. We don't have any special equipment, no wires, no rigs, nothing. And so we just started leaning back to the same tricks and tactics that we used, when you're 13 and you're making movies with your parents' video camera. We put the two of them on a platform, and we sort of just slowly spun them around by hand. 2 or 3 people were laying on the floor of the elevator with leaf blowers, blowing their hair around. And then there's a lot of acting. There's just a lot of weirdly just anti-gravity acting where they're just pretending to float in slow motion. And we did a couple of, a pickup shot, or not a pickup, but an insert shot where 2 grips held Barrick, the actor who plays Wendell, and we just picked him up off the ground and we shot his feet slowly rising off the ground. I mean, for a second. And it's sort of a testament to the magic of cinema, what you can pull off with the most lo-fi techniques, but just careful editing and careful planning. And I think it became, there's something almost more beautiful in the fact that we didn't have the fancy rigs and the fancy cameras to pull it off. I don't know. It harkens back to, again, I guess, like sort of a more classic style of storytelling.
That's it exactly. I was thinking that I don't think the movie would have been as good as if you had more money, because you really had to reach. You had to find creative ways to do these special effects, and I think that's when we're at our best, is when we don't have a budget and we're struggling to find solutions, and you come up with ideas for that. Because I have to tell you, that scene, the lighting, the slow motion, it told their whole story, and you can see his heart breaking every day since she became catatonic, and the sort of betrayal he has to live with, but the man just can't do it anymore. And what I need to do is have my wife come in, the wonderful Allison, and she's been incredible these last couple of years, is come in and watch that scene, and I'm going to watch her face, and if she has no emotion, I'm going to be like, I'm safe, I'm good. But if she starts to cry or react, I'm going to be packing my things and getting my affairs together. It's going to be. We'll be right back talking to Mr. Ryan Spindell about his wonderful movie, The Mortuary Collection, on Shudder. This is What Are You Afraid Of? Check out our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com for information about this interview, links to his work, plus our gallery of horror stories and ghost stories read by our voice actors. We'll be right back.
Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror Paranormal Show, Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com.
What are you afraid of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X.
We're back. This is episode 152, The Mortuary Interview. We're winding down our interview. It's Halloween, and I'm going to tell you a story about Samhain. I'm a practicing bard and pagan. So this is our new year. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but we see the year as the beginning of the life cycle, traveling through the year to the end of the life cycle, and we assign holidays to the various youth, getting married, and of course death at Samhain. And I mentioned my story with cancer. I was 18 when I was diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma that had only been seen 15 times before and never defeated. I went through CHOP chemo, very intense chemotherapy, and then 4 months of radiation through Penn, where they radiated my spine, neck, and face, which I would suffer damage for the rest of my life from. And it was around October 5th years ago that I brought my friends together to play a Ravenloft game at the comic book shop for D&D, and I remember I couldn't lift my head off the table. I was so sick, and when I went home, my mother took me right to the hospital, and that's when they figured I was going to die. And I spent 3 weeks in that state, in this sort of airy state, and death like that doesn't come quickly. You just sort of fade. I was down to 70 pounds, and I really thought that was it. And I just sort of lied there and waited for it. You don't really fight cancer. You sort of endure what they do to you with the treatment. It's usually the treatment that kills you. But after some very interesting experiences, I survived, and I was deemed in remission, which was a miracle. And they let me come home on Halloween, where some friends came over. I was 18, but I decided I wanted to trick-or-treat, so we sort of improvised costumes, these stupid costumes. I think I put face paint on my under my nose, so I was Groucho Marx, and I had this like cigar thing. And we went and trick-or-treated, and my throat was so swollen from the radiation and scar tissue that I had to sort of suck on the candy. I couldn't really swallow it. So Samhain is a special time for me, and I celebrate that life and renewal every year, and it's very pagan, and it winds to that year. So Merry Samhain, everybody, and I hope everyone's having a happy Halloween this year, and of course a safe Halloween with COVID. So we're winding down our interview. So I see you're doing some work with the great Sam Raimi. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sam put together this anthology show. Again, it always comes back to anthologies with me. But he was putting together a horror anthology show called 50 States of Fright, which essentially takes a different urban legend from each of the 50 states of the United States and turns them into sort of a live action, sort of fun horror movie or horror episode, I guess. They're about half-hour episodes. What's nice about it is he's, Sam being sort of very much a sort of do-it-yourself guy who sort of made his career from scratch is now sort of taking a bunch of new, younger, up-and-coming filmmakers under his wing and giving them the opportunities to make really cool movies with decent-sized budgets. And so I directed an episode called Scared Stiff, which is set in Oregon, and it is about a eccentric taxidermist who lives in a cabin and chooses to be left alone with his creations. And one night, a local guy shows up with a unidentifiable animal that he hit with his car. And he tasks the taxidermist with trying to figure out what it was. And so you can imagine where it could go from there. The series was on Quibi, but Quibi just shut down. So we were actually in the process of, I'd written 2 more episodes for the next season, and I was supposed to direct one in a couple months here. So we're just trying to recalibrate over here and figure out if the show is going to live on somewhere else and if another outlet's going to pick it up. I really hope they do, because it really is a wonderful show that I think it was sort of getting its sea legs on the first round, but it's really sort of evolving in a way that I don't think there's anything else like it out there. So I really hope it doesn't, go to sleep because of this.
And I guess that's the nature of streaming. It's opened up a lot of opportunities, but some of it can be so transitory and just as quickly as it appears. And something that really bothered us this Halloween was that 2 years ago, you could find all your favorite horror movies on like Hulu or Netflix, but now there are so many sub-streaming services that they're just scattered everywhere.
I know. I'm the same. I've had a hard time. I just want to watch a creepy Halloween movie, and I'm just scanning, and there's 30 different services, and I'm checking each one, and sometimes something pops up on one, but I can't find it anywhere else. And I actually found that I was having a hard time finding anything that was fun. I was really looking for fun horror, just something light and of the season. And I had a really hard time finding anything that sort of fit that category for me, which I think might sort of be part of the reason why the Mortuary Collection is doing so well, is it does sort of exist in this space that isn't really being dabbled into that much right now.
Well, I have many friends in the Horror Writers Association that just have been talking about it on Facebook, so I was really glad I could convince you to come on and do an interview. It's definitely going to be the most memorable horror film this Halloween for 2020 for many of us. So we're talking about good horror, fun horror. Besides fun horror, in horror, for horror general, what elements make horror into good horror? I mean, what do you lump to read and see in horror stories and movies?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but for me, it's interesting characters that I can latch myself onto. It's the same rules that apply to any sort of genre of story or storytelling. You need a way in that is you either connect with it or you're curious to know more about it and the people that exist in the space, and you need to want to follow them on the journey to take it. And I do think that this, I feel like we're keep coming back around to sort of attacking a lot of modern horror, but horror is a premise-based genre, and that's a lot of times where projects start is a concept, but you can't start and end with the concept. You can start with the concept, but you must populate it with living, breathing characters that we want to see make it through or not make it through. And so I guess that's what I look for in everything.
Well, of course, because you grew up reading Stephen King, so now you're addicted to a lot of good characters in one story or movie. It's very true. In the end, horror is just a good story. We do need good characters. We definitely need some themes, and we need a good resolution, like you said. The longer the film is, or the story is, the better the ending needs to be, something I've discovered. And something else you've been talking a lot about is that I'm sure you dreamt of making horror stories and making horror films like this, and you're definitely living your dream, but you've also learned the cold reality of the money, people, the financing. And a few years ago, Throughline Films bought the rights to a crime novel of mine set in Philadelphia called The Street Martyr, and at that point, movies like that were doing very well, And then they developed the script. They brought in a great scriptwriter for London, and it was moving forward. And then everything changed. The kind of characters changed. The kind of stories changed that people wanted to see and streaming service wanted to see. So they've had a hard time finding the funding for it. And now it's not on hold. They keep searching for it with these streaming services. But there's a lot of realities as an author that one has to accept, and that Hollywood does like to do a lot of meetings, and you can sell the film rights to your book, but it doesn't all happen at once. In fact, there's a lot of film projects that sort of go up in smoke, and I'm glad that mine has stayed the course, especially for true crime. So has that been particularly frustrating for you, dealing with the money business side of this?
Oh, yes, 100%. They say that Hollywood is the only place where you can die from encouragement. And I found that to be true. You have to almost steel yourself for a bunch of talk. Like you said, it's meetings and meetings and meetings and talking, and everybody's about to sort of do something big, and everybody's going to make the next thing, and you're going to be involved, and it's going to be awesome. And ultimately, it sort of comes down to taking your own initiative and pushing that boulder up the hill yourself. And as somebody who always has been sort of a just do-it-yourself type of person, that was a big lesson for me to learn coming out here, because I did assume that once I'd reached a certain level of success that my career would, people would come in and they would help me push my career forward and help me sort of take those next steps. And the cold reality is you learn again and again that if you don't do it yourself, nobody is. And I think that is probably the case for a lot of these sort of creative pursuits and sort of the struggle of the artist.
When it comes to indie writing, especially with indie publishing, you can have some good publishers out there, especially on the indie level, like Grey Matter Press, my friend Anthony Riviera there, or the people that published my horror medical novel, Mercy, which I based on a lot of the suffering I experienced, the chemotherapy, the spinal taps, the bone marrow extractions, and I poured a lot of that into the book. And what a lot of new authors find out is they think they're going to get published, and for some reason, being published is the ultimate end for a lot of people. But you find yourself a substantial publisher. They're in India, so they don't have a lot of money. They publish your book, and then it really becomes about how much work you can put into it, because the best books can be published. I mean, they could publish Stephen King today or Ray Bradbury, but without promotion or a budget, these books are generally forgotten about. And a lot of new authors come into the field, have their books published, think they're going to be the next Stephen King, and then their sales never go up, and they don't realize they have to really get in there. They have to dig. It's an uphill battle, and it's a marathon. It's a constant battle that you could never stop seeking promotion, never stop trying to get the book out there, because unless you've got $10,000 for a publicity campaign, and most of the publishers don't, that you have to really be able to survive this gauntlet and trial of promotion and constantly getting the book into people's hands, except for not overdoing it and pushing yourself onto them in the indie world. But you've created such a wonderful project, and we're so happy to talk to you about it. So one last question before we let you off the hook, and I know you're a busy fellow. What's coming up for you in the future besides the Sam Raimi stuff?
For people like myself in the film industry, everyone's been on hold, so because of the COVID pandemic. So I think that things are starting to click into place, and gears are starting to turn slowly but surely over here. And so I think it's all about finding that next project and hopefully, being able to use the Mortuary Collection as an indicator of what I could do with maybe even a little bit more money than we had on that one. So I'm a writer, so I write all the time. I'm finishing a new script. I'm also developing a TV show with a producer. But it's sort of you're always spinning multiple plates. Hoping one of them, I don't know where that analogy is going. I don't know what you want the plates to do other than spin, but trying to find the next thing that's going to be your obsession. I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic as always.
That's it. That's exactly what I feel from now on, especially going through the process of working with Through Line Films and having to be patient. Whenever I see something cool happen or something with a great potential to help develop my own career, that's what I tell people. I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see where it goes.
Smart.
Yeah, you have to have, like you said, many plates spinning in the air. Well, it's been incredible speaking to you, and this is a wonderful way to wrap up our Halloween programming. This is What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Parax Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Check out our website for more information about Ryan, his work, plus our catalog of ghost stories read by voice actors. Some new horror fiction is going up there, plus articles and recipes, including my recipe for the wonderful caramel apple sangria that my wife and I like to make this time of year, plus my pumpkin scones that hopefully I will be baking soon. And check out a page for every episode. This is 152 episodes. We've been doing this for a couple years now, and really seeing our efforts start to pay off, and that's been incredible. So thank you everybody for staying with us for Halloween 2020. We hope we brought you some distraction, because that's really what storytellers are here for, is to bring you distraction, especially during these hard times, and we hope everyone is safe. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Fox, thank you so much for having me. This was a really cool, in-depth, and wonderful conversation.
It really was, and I quite enjoyed it. That's one thing that's so great about the show, is meeting these people like Greg Bear or like Daniel Kraus, and getting to geek out with them a little bit and hear about their creative process.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I've been making a list here. You were talking about some of the earlier episodes. I got a list here to check out now. I can't wait.
Definitely. This is What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show, episode 152, The Mortuary Interview, with the wonderful Ryan Spindell. Episode 152, The Mortuary Interview. It was a great interview with Mr. Spindell, and I thank him so much for taking the time to talk to me. And we got to talk about a lot of our favorites like Ray Bradbury, and he's doing a lot of work with Sam Raimi coming up in the future, and it sounds like he's really having a lot of fun and living the dream.
He's working with Sam Raimi? Really?
He is.
Wow. Okay.
On a new series that sounds incredible, and he's looking at another producer, and he's making his mark. He's getting there, and he's bringing a revival back of the 80s tactile. He calls it the fun genre. He wants fun in his picture. He doesn't want brooding or misery. He wants it to be the kind of picture you watch and go, oh my God.
Yeah, I really wish I could have joined you for that interview. I just had a horrible week. So
I know.
Yeah.
But he'll be back. This was just preliminary. So
good.
No, he's going to come back and chat with us, definitely. And so you can meet him and talk to him. I was lucky to get the interview too, because he's incredibly busy, and we got it out. We're going to get it out tonight. So right now, Para X tonight is going to be playing our interview with Michelle Bollinger from Portals to Hell, and she was on Paranormal State.
That was great having her on there. That was a great interview. Great show, great interview, it was
very informative.
Yeah.
Well, we've done like 5 episodes. We had Phil and Fox Save Halloween. We had the zombie one with Daniel Kraus. We had Drawing Down the Spirits with Lisa Morton's seances based on her book Drawing Down the Spirits. We had Dacre Stoker, Vampire Lord Dacre Stoker, and then Michelle Bollinger, The Haunted World. And we're closing out with this episode 152, The Mortuary Interview.
And I know you're convinced that Dacre Stoker is really Bram Stoker. He's a vampire, and he's shrouding his identity.
We know what's so terrible is I'm like investigating him now. So I feel like I'm Von Helsing to his Dacre to his Bram Stoker. I'm convinced he's a vampire, and why not? And of course, that wonderful story that my friend Deborah Drake wrote about The Last Vampire's Kiss, which I'm really happy she could contribute that. Okay, so Phil, I know what you're doing tonight. You're writing your article, and that sounds like fun. Let me ask you one question. Well, 1 or 2 questions before we go.
Sure.
What candy makes Halloween Halloween for you? And what candy did you hate getting for Halloween?
I think the candy that makes Halloween for me, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. When I was a kid, that just always seemed to be the thing that I related to. Okay, and candy I hated getting. You know what I didn't like? Like butterscotch candies. I never liked those. Like whenever I got those, I was just like, and I would just give them away. So
Yeah. I gotcha.
Yeah, well, how about you?
I gotta say, but I divide Halloween candy into 2 sides, the chocolate and the sugary sweet. So I gotta say it was the Crunch Bar minis, or those little little rainbow gum glow balls in the 2 per packet.
Okay, yeah.
And
I remember those.
And what did I hate most? Candy corn.
Oh, you don't like, really?
Not a fan.
Really?
I could also eat candles at home, so I don't need to get candy corn. you know.
I didn't realize that a lot of people don't like it, and I thought just everyone liked it. I loved it, eating it as a kid growing up. I always ate candy corn. Mm-hmm. That's funny. Yeah, it's not for everyone.
So going to wish our pagan friends a Ma Samhain, a happy Samhain. I'll be celebrating both holidays out here in Lancaster, and the kids are supposed to be out tonight. Now, originally, I was going to set up a table downstairs on Cherry Street. It's a back alley, but there's a lot of houses on here with doors because we have a staircase going down and we'll never hit the door. But it doesn't sound like there are going to be a lot of kids out tonight, so I guess we have to wait till next year to see what Halloween would have been like out here in Lancaster. But it's a fun time. I'll be working on this show tonight. I'm going to get it out. The website is doing incredibly well. I'm looking at this now. We just got another 100 hits, but it looks like it's mostly the ghost stories that are getting hit. After I organized the ghost stories, they look really good on your phone now at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. And last night I redid the subscribe page that appears on all pages, and it lists everything from iHeartRadio to Player FM. We're everywhere.
Yeah, you turn your head and there we are. Boom. Mm-hmm. Right? We're like spooks inspectors.
We are like spooks inspectors.
The Halloween season's over, whatever. But if you ever get a chance in the next month or so, you should really, really check out Resident Evil 2, the remake.
Oh, I will.
I kind of wanted a game. Bought it a couple weeks ago. I wanted a game to play this season, and it's really exceeded my expectations. Like it really has. Like I knew it was going to be good, otherwise I wouldn't have bought it. But I didn't realize it was going to be this good.
I got to check this out. Is it PS4 only? I take it.
No, it's PC also. Yeah.
It's PC also. See, that's cool. Well, I have some books I still want to read. Yeah, and I need to continue reading Opium and Absinthe by Lydia Kang because we'll be talking to her next week.
And I have that book as well.
That's going to be a lot of fun. We get to hang out with Lydia, and we've got a lot of fun stuff planned for the next year. Like in the last few weeks, I have gotten so many emails from people who want to be on the show. Ghost hunters, horror authors, bakers, you name it. So we're going to have some incredible content going into 2021 because it sounds like this winter, maybe even spring, you should just stay home, get a few streaming services, and avoid COVID, let them clean it up, and come and listen to our show. What are you afraid of? So Phil, before we go, what was your favorite episode from our Halloween season?
Favorite episode? My favorite episode from our Halloween season?
Yeah.
I like Dacre Stoker.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah. I thought it was a great episode.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun to talk to and very informative. Well, of course, I really enjoyed speaking to Ryan Spindell, but that was sort of an extra thing, extra bonus thing. I really enjoyed speaking to Michelle Bollinger. I've actually walked over my grave a few times. Yeah. She and I had such similar viewpoints about what we sense and what we see in the universe.
I've noticed that. I really did. Yeah.
It's the first time that's ever happened. It's probably one of the few times I can meet a psychic and say, I believe she's genuine.
I could tell she was. She seemed like the genuine article. And I saw that you guys had that connection, not just with extrasensory perception, but also with like D&D and all that.
I wrote her the email with the episode in it last night, and in the middle of all the stuff, I told her about how our Ravenloft game is going, and I ran our players through my All Souls Circus. So I had little puppets, like the little puppets, they walked into a theater, and the puppets were doing a show, and they were singing my own horrible version of It's a Small World, which I won't sing because of copyright issues. But they come down to like, hey, those guys don't like our play. Let's get them. And so they had like 4 or 5 little puppets beating the crap out of them for an hour.
Nice. That sounds cool.
That's probably been my favorite part about October 2020, has been playing D&D, Gothic Horror, with good friends from around the state. We're all playing online. And I put a lot of energy into those games. They're all my own design. And it's just been amazing to have that experience again after so many years.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're getting that experience because it seems like it's revitalized you.
It has. You see, exactly. It's why I'm writing more. It's why I finished that article on Nikki Scarfo, the story for Mitzi Sorrento, which will be coming out in a month or two.
I want to mention before we go, my short story was published, I think, yesterday.
Oh, was it?
Through Drunken Pen Publishing. Yeah, they accepted it, and it was they posted it yesterday. I think it was yesterday, but either way, it's up there. It's on the website.
Okay, I will get it up on our website.
All right,
and make sure they can find it. I'll put links up to this, and we have a fiction area now. I'll get some links up there. And what's it called?
I wrote a short story. It's called Bonnie.
Okay.
About a woman who moves to a neighborhood with her husband. They move from an apartment building, and she really couldn't display anything significant on their lawn because they didn't have one. So she went crazy and started buying all this stuff. And she was at a yard sale and saw this one witch, and it was like $400. And she's like, after all the money she spent, I can't really do it, you know. So ironically, the woman that was there sells it to her for $1, and she brings it home, and her husband kind of hits the ceiling because he thinks she really spent that amount. He's like, it's going back. Long story short, there's something trapped in that doll that he really wants to bring this doll back, but the witch has other plans. Let's just put it that way.
That sounds amazing. I'm gonna read that tonight, and I'm gonna make sure we have a link up at our website for our viewers to read it, because you know what? Tomorrow may be Halloween, but it's a Saturday. Allison took off today. I'm cooking chili out there. I've got it going. I'm going to make some sweet cornbread in a minute. I'm going to do cheese pumpkin brownies for her. I'm going to make my pumpkin scones. And you know what else I'm doing? I'm making pumpkin martinis.
Pumpkin martinis.
Pumpkin martinis. Right? We picked up the sweet pumpkin cream liquor. There's a local brand, actually. We picked up vanilla vodka. You mix it together, maybe add a little Fireball whiskey, a little cinnamon to it, and then you coat the edge of the glass with cinnamon, sugar, nutmeg, and a little pumpkin spice, and it's really good.
Nice. You know what? I'm jealous.
I'll put up a link to those recipes too over at our website, our new and improved website, and definitely go check it out for Phil's story. My recipes for pumpkin cheesecake is up there, my caramel apple sangria, and now my pumpkin pie martinis over at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. Go over there and subscribe, because we are doing a lot of substantive stories and episodes. We're not just hanging out with people and being like, what up? We're talking about zombies and vampires and scary food and good haunted houses. And
we're doing it all, man. We're doing it all.
Yeah. Well, Phil, it's been an incredible 6 episodes, and I think that's been one of my favorite parts about Halloween is I moved far from you, but we could still spend October together.
Yeah, we still did it.
Yes, we did. Great, and we want to thank all of our fans. I want to thank Lisa Morton, Daniel Krause, Dacre Stoker, Michelle Bollinger, and our wonderful new friend Ryan Spindell for coming up and hanging out with us this Halloween.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to remember now, Grady Hendrix, he didn't fall into our...
it was
Halloween.
Right before.
It was like right before, yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if that was part of our Halloween. Yeah, because that was a little before, yeah.
Oh, every episode is a part of our Halloween. Halloween season.
Yeah, I know it is. You're right, it is.
And
yeah.
Mr.
I had a great time.
It was fun.
No, Grady Hendrix was great, yeah.
It was.
Grady Hendrix is a vampire.
That's the one.
Right?
And go over to our website again, www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. So thank you, Phil, and I want to wish you a happy, spooky Halloween and a merry Samhain as the old year turns.
You too, Buck. Happy, spooky Halloween. And happy Samhain.
Keep the spooky in Halloween. This has been wonderful, and we'll see our guests soon with Lydia Kang. This is T. Fox Dunham.
And this is Phil Thomas.
The sun goes down, the moon comes up, and here comes the price. Here comes the price of Halloween night. They're hunting, it's daunting. They carry flashlights. They carry flashlights on this Halloween night. If you hear a rapping on your door, prepare yourself for a dreadful fright on Halloween night. Halloween night. Halloween night. Halloween night. Werewolves are around, ghosts make no sound. Gremlins are creeping and monsters are sleeping. Skeletons are dancing while the vampires bite on Halloween night. On Halloween night. Have you heard a rapping on your door? Oh, it's such a dreadful fright on Halloween night. Halloween night. Halloween night.
Werewolves are around. Wolves make no sound. Gremlins are creeping around. Monsters sleeping. Skeletons are dancing while the vampires bite.
You know, blow up a dick if you have to.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A television series based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology Points of Origin from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time. Find out more information at www.tfoxdunham.com.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into 2 feature films, False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon Prime on demand. His screenplay, 3 Tunnels, was a semi-finalist at the LA Screenplay Competition. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. He formerly held the position of Senior Marketing Manager at Eternal Press, and was a journalist for Patch, where he wrote a daily tech column covering the latest electronics and gadgets. He lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and is currently working on his second novel, Worst Afterlife Ever.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.